Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Tahir Kapasi, and I am the Regional Education Manager for ACCA in the Middle East. Our presentation today is going to be on the essence of auditing and what is involved in real life practice. So, auditing is an important component in the sphere of accounting and finance, and these are basically retrospective, independent checks of an organization's financial health. In most part of the world, these are a legal requirement where and when we're not required legally to do so, organizations do these as a general best practice. So training under audit and assurance will give you a wide range of valuable experience which will help you throughout your career. I just wanted to put in a fun fact here. So, audit and assurance basically to date remains the most popular choice of profession amongst young and budding accountants like yourselves. As a perfect place to begin their journey, and therefore obviously attracts many professionals each year. And did you know the combined revenue of the big four basically last year in 2019 amounted to 154.7 billion US dollars. So if you can certainly imagine, how popular the profession is. I mean, I will obviously stop speaking about audit and assurance right now because we've got two remarkable presenters with us this afternoon who will obviously be sharing their insights, their experiences, and their valuable thoughts. But before and sort of give us a lot of guidance. But before we actually dive into the session, let's think about some housekeeping rules. So it's a 1 hour 15-minute presentation. The slides will obviously move as the speaker speaks and presents. If you find that the slides are not moving, I think it's probably going to be worth logging out and logging back into the session and ensure you're live and you're being able to sort of follow through the live presentation. We've also got a dedicated Q&A section towards the end, so we've left we want to ensure that we give you all an opportunity to come and talk to us, engage with us, speak to the speakers, ask your questions. You will be able to sort of put your questions and comments in the live comments section. At the end, we will be addressing these. We'll be keeping 5 to 10 minutes at the end, and we'll address as many questions and comments as we possibly can. So without further ado, let me move on with the session. We will today be covering a couple of things. So, obviously, I'll share a couple of key updates with you on ACCA. We will then have our audit experience session by Saad Maniar, followed by preparing for your audit and insurance exam, which is a tutor specific session delivered by SM Umar Farooq. Towards the end, like I said, we will be addressing your questions and comments. So keep them parked. We will be tracking them as they come up to you. Type it into your comment section, and feel free to send them across to us, and we will be looking to addressing them. And I will be sort of I will be shooting them across to Saad or Umar, or answering some of them myself, however they are relevant. And we will hopefully be looking to close the engagement session today at the end. So on ACCA updates, I want to keep this quick. There's not a huge amount of information here. I want to take this opportunity to remind you all that the standard exam entry deadline is fast approaching. 27th July is the date. Please, if you've not registered for your ACCA exams, I would request all students to log in, register for your ACCA exams to ensure that you don't have any disappointments. This will also help us arrange capacity better because we know a lot of you have missed a couple of exam options. So there's going to be a huge influx of students wanting to sit their ACCA exams. So in order to ensure we're able to sort of support you better, we would request that you register for your exams as early as possible. There's a particular exam support resource that I'd like to signpost on this webinar, which is the ACCA Practice Platform. Now, the ACCA Practice Platform replicates the real exam sort of platform and the real exam environment. It's an excellent, platform that you can use to support with your ACCA exam preparation. There's a dedicated webinar that we hosted around this. It is also available on our accame.me webpage. Feel free to look into that webinar and start using the valuable resource that has been provided to you. These were the two real updates from my side, ACC updates. I would now firstly like to begin with thanking our two presenters, Saad Maniar and Omar Farooq. Saad and Omar have kindly sort of, agreed and graciously sort of honored our session today. Saad is a senior partner of Crow Mac Limited based in Dubai, UAE. He heads one of the network branches located in Dubai's main financial hub, DIFC. He also oversees the governance, risk, and compliance practice for Crow Mac Limited in the Middle East region. Besides this, his core duty of leading audit practice is involved. So Saad works with a range of different functions at Grove, and he also happens to be the current chairman of our members advisory committee in the UAE. So thank you, Saad, for your valuable contribution. Omar,
Thank
again,
you.
Omar is a globally qualified chartered accountant and a member of the ACCA UK. He is also a member of the Malaysian Institute of Accountants, and Omar has established himself as a renowned ACCA lecturer in the Asia region, especially in Singapore, Malaysia, Cambodia, and Bangladesh. So he also has the honor of lecturing for ACCA papers, audit and assurance, obviously being his speciality. Omar possesses, 9 years of ACCA lecturing experience. So Omar is also going to be sharing his valuable inputs on today's session, and this is really a fantastic opportunity, I think, for all of you, all of the attendees, all of our students to engage with Saad and engage with Omar and basically get all your questions on audit and assurance answered. So without wasting any further time, I would like to now hand it over to Saad for his session. So, Saad, over to you. Feel free to sort of give me a nudge whenever you want me to shift the slides for you, please.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Tahir. Appreciate this. And welcome to all the students and the affiliates, whoever have joined this webinar. I would quickly want to move on to the next slide and share my experience with all of you. Overall, I have about 25 years of experience, out of which 22 years have been in the audit. And I've been asked by ACCA to share my experience, which will allow you to gain a little bit of insight into what happens in practice and apply that practice experience into your exams. So with this, I have the learning objectives defined here. Firstly is to understand what is audit. Then we'll also discuss very briefly why audit is important, understanding how audit workflows. This is where we'll be spending a little bit more time so that you understand how the audit starts and how it is concluded. Then what are the considerations that needs to be addressed given the pandemic situation. So I anticipate that in the next exam, this is going to be the hot topic. So you must expect a question around this topic the next time around. And then as we go along, I'll be referring to a few key auditing standards, which you may want to make a note of. So with that, let's start with understanding what is an audit. It is pretty much simple. All of you may be aware about the definitions of audit, but I'd like to put this again on records here, that audit is to express an opinion on the truth and fairness of the financial statements. The key here is to express an opinion, and expressing an opinion in an independent capacity, that is important. So here in the audited financial statements, it is a requirement in the audit report to mention that the auditor is independent and is complying with the ISBA Code of Ethics. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Why is audit important? The stakeholders, that is the users of the financial statements, only get the independent auditor's report on which they can rely on. Otherwise, the management produced management accounts are not as reliable because they are not independently vetted. So you will hear throughout the presentation the importance of independence in the audit. So audit is absolutely important because this is where the third party can place the reliance that it is being checked by someone independent with the with the qualification, and this is where they'll be able to place an importance and rely on the audited financial statements. Next, please. So how the audit workflows. So even before we go on to the audit in terms of how the audit workflows, I want to take a step back and explain you how the client engagement starts. So first, there is an inquiry from the client. And before even we respond to that inquiry, we are required by the laws and regulations, that mostly the anti-money laundering related regulations and the auditing standards regulations, that we check the appropriateness of the clients, that is the riskiness within the client, whether there are any kind of a red flags on the client, and then only we take on this kind of a conversation further. So we have to obtain a lot of information from the client in order for us to evaluate whether we are fit to do that audit. There is no conflict of interest. We are independent to perform the audit, and so on. So internally, we have to maintain the register of all our clients globally, so that we can check that there is no conflict of interest with any of the given entity across the globe, because there are entities who have the parent company somewhere located outside our jurisdiction, and this is where the conflict may arise. So it is absolutely important to evaluate, and preliminary assessment is very important. It does happen occasionally that at the preliminary stage we overlook certain necessary information, which comes to us at a later stage when the engagement letter is signed, and at that moment then we have to resign or maybe manage the situation, which is not very nice at times. So let's move with that kind of a backdrop. Let's move on to the next slide, and where we'll go into a little bit more details into how the audit work really flows. So once the client has accepted our proposal, the next stage is to issue an engagement letter, which will set out the terms and conditions, the respective roles and responsibilities of the auditors, and likewise of the management. And also it is important to set out the template of the audit report, how it will look like, without of course the qualification or any modification that may necessarily be required, so that the reader is aware about what are the deliverables going to be like. So once we have the engagement letter issued, we have to also ensure that the client acceptance and the continuance process. It may be a situation that the client is a previous year client of ours, so we just need to continue with this engagement. It is absolutely important to address all the ISQC related requirement. The ISQC has 6 fundamental requirements. That is the leadership role and responsibility of the quality within the firm, the client acceptance and continuance, monitoring, the HR, the ethical requirements, and the engagement performance. So this is part of the ISQC 1 requirement. Now, ISQC 1 standard is also in a process of getting changed. By 2022, we will have the new standards. It may be deferred because of the COVID implication, but currently as it stands, the new standard is likely to come into implementation. Currently, the ISQC 1 standards takes care of the quality-related matter, but only restricted to the audit. However, you may be aware about this, that all the audit firms across the globe, at least the top 10, 20 network firms, they are also engaged in the consulting activities. And the consulting activities are not covered within the ISQC 1 standards. So the standard setters have revised the standards and changed it to ISQM 1, and that will take care of the overall quality of the firm's practice. So with that, the kind of things that we need to consider in the client's acceptance and continuance is firstly that we have the necessary competencies and skills. Then we got to also ensure that there is no conflict of interest, that is, we are independent to perform the audit. There is no negative red flags on the client. There are no regulatory issues. There are no criminal convictions, and so on. And once the client acceptance and continuance is done, we can move on to the further planning. The planning and the risk assessment stage, as I have defined, as you can see on the slides, the first 1 and 2 point will take about 25 to 30% of the time. The time well spent in the planning means that the quality of the output that we get is of the high standards. So it is absolutely important that we spend enough time in planning and risk assessment. And this sets the tone for the overall audit. So the overall audit strategy involves the assessment of the work and the deliverables, what is expected. Then what are the timelines? Is there any kind of limitations in scope? Is there any kind of pressure from the client which may impair the independence? And the meeting with the clients to understand the overall expectations. So this is all covered in the overall audit strategy and the client meetings and the deliverables. The team discussion also further drills down into the kind of work that needs to be done. The partners will share their experience and set the tone for the audit in terms of identifying the relevant risk and sharing the overall experience regarding that particular industry with the team. The time budget, of course, as with any business, the time budget is absolutely important, because for any business to survive, all the engagements have to be profitable. So based on the initial time estimation set out at the proposal that is being shared with the audit team, and the respective roles and responsibilities have been will have to be defined here in the time budget as well. The audit team will request the modification in terms of the time budget if that is necessary to take care based on the information that they may have gathered after getting the preliminary information from the client. Based on the preliminary information that we may have gathered from the client, the materiality is set. Normally, the materiality is set between 2 to 5% of the total revenues or the total assets, depending on the nature of the business which we are auditing. Understanding the entity and the risk assessment is very important. One standard that is the most important standard in the whole of the audit is ISA 315. That is the risk assessment standards. And from the exam preparation point of view also, if you have to focus on one standard, then this is the standard which you should be reading very carefully, because this is absolutely important as far as the audit is concerned. And it brings out all the risk factors. The audit is to be done based on the risk that we identify. The risk that we identify cannot be endless. There has to be the significant risk and certain risks which are kind of inherent and less insignificant also exist. But the significant risk that needs to be addressed, and so the risk, the number of risks that you open in any engagement normally ranges between 4 to 5 risk factors. The two risk factors which are by default to be considered is the revenue recognition and the fraud risk, which comes out as a result of the management bias. So for the journal entry testing here to for address this fraud and the management risk is absolutely important here. Moving on, once the planning is done, we know what are the tests that needs to be performed in terms of the assets, liabilities, equities, revenue, expenses, test of controls, substantive procedures. Of course, we also need to perform the analytical procedures at the planning stage and at the conclusion stage also, if there are any changes in there, and document it. These days, a lot of emphasis is there on the analytical review, and we use the tools like Power BI and Tableau to analyze the details. The Power BI tool related training sessions, a lot of them available online, and I encourage all of you to gain some knowledge and insight into the Power BI, especially for those who are on a path to get into the employment. This will be very handy and useful to you. Evaluation, and if moving on towards the conclusion, evaluating the material misstatement is important. From the audit partner's point of view, the audit partners will reflect their thoughts on the audit findings summarized by the auditor and the manager, and the conclusion will be drawn on the risks that were identified, what work has been done. And it is also important to communicate with those charged in governance, right? This communication with those in charge with governance is covered in the standards ISA 260 and ISA 265. Now, for the kind of communication that needs to go before the conclusion is arrived is that what were the risks that we identified at the planning stage? What was the level of materiality that was there? What was the trivial materiality that was applied for this particular audit? What was the work done to address the risks that were identified, and what were the findings as a result, and what was the conclusion drawn on all of those findings, and whether we anticipate to issue a clean opinion or whether we expect to issue any modification in the audited financial statements. And finally, there could be some areas for improvements, that is the control weaknesses that we may have identified or which may have come through. Then that also needs to be brought to the attention of the management or those in charge with governance. Then the financial statements are reviewed. Also, the EQCR is Engagement Quality Control Review. So for the public interest entities are defined as if it is a listed company, or the financial service entities, that is the asset managers and all those regulated entities. So each of these entities which are defined in the public interest entities needs to be reviewed by a separate engagement quality control reviewer. That is, the another partner has to review all the planning till the conclusion stage and concur with the signing partner that yes, the opinion you have formed is appropriate to be issued, so that the quality can be ensured and the element of independence is also ensured, and there is no compromise on the independence. Globally, we have seen many failures, and most of the failures that we have seen is not because of the auditors failing to do the work on the assets and the liabilities and the equities and the revenue. It is mostly due to the impairment of the independence of the auditors, and also at times the lack of professional skepticism. So for many a times we receive the documents which are 100% accurate, including the bank confirmation. But if we have not applied a professional skepticism in terms of the rationale behind those things, I can give you one example where we were auditing one client where the client's turnover jumped from like 50 million to 250 million, and the client had all the necessary supporting documents, including the invoices, the bill of lading, the transaction in the bank. They received the payment, they made the payment to the supplier. Everything was there. But the jump from 50 million to 250 million, plus a significant net profit margin, was too good to be true. And so when we applied our professional skepticism onto that, we were not able to conclude that the documents which were shared by the client, the evidence which were produced as in front of us to conclude the audit, were not sufficient and appropriate. And for eventually in this particular client, we had to disengage from this client. And as a result of the disengagement, or even if we are not going to be disengaged, but we have the professional obligation to report to the central bank about our suspicion regarding the anti-money laundering related issues. So there are a lot many things that needs to be considered in the audit. It is difficult to take you through all of those things in this 20-30 minutes session. But just to quickly wrap up, I would want to share the few tips with you to score to build your score on this audit paper. Firstly, you got to remember these 3 or 4 key words. Firstly, the independence. Second, planning. Third, communication. And fourth is professional skepticism. Now, in any question that you get in the audit test, if you are struggling to build your answer, think about these 4 points, and you will be able to build your answer around these 4 points. So my advice is but you have to make it relevant to the question. But in my experience, if I go back 25 years when I was appearing for this exam, this is how I used to build my answers, and this is how I used to link it with the practical experience what I gained, and this allows the individual to score. And trust me, these 4 key words which I shared with you is worth about at least 10-12 marks in the exam, which would be the difference between the pass and fail. So with that, I hand it over back to Tahir, and if you have any questions, then I'm happy to take them on towards the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Saad, for
Do we
the
have time to go through this COVID-related couple of points?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Please feel free, sir.
Okay, so maybe if you can move on to the next slide, then I will quickly run them through. The key challenge in the COVID working from home kind of a situation that we were facing was to obtain the audit evidence. So we had to revert to citing the original documents online via this kind of a platform, the MS Teams or Zoom or any other platform that we were using. Judgment and the accounting estimates was another challenge. Revenue recognition was again challenging, particularly knowing that post the year end there has been significant dip in the revenue, which could have uh, a significant impact on the continuity of the business. The liquidity risk was alarming due to the COVID situation. The businesses were not able to collect the receivables which were due, and as a result, it put them in a stressed situation. And many of them, we have seen that they had to go into the liquidation and shut down their business. The fair value measurement was again a challenging thing to be addressed, as there is a lot of uncertainty around the COVID situation, so the projections cannot be reasonably ascertained at this stage. Also, the subsequent event disclosure was challenging here in this case. So, Tahir, you can move to the next slide. Uh, Expected credit loss. Again, this mostly relates to the receivables, the impairment assessment relating to that, inventory valuation, inventory verification was really a challenging. Can imagine a situation where we are not able to go out and about, and we had to, if we have to verify the inventory to validate the assertions of existence, then it was almost impossible to do that. Fortunately, here in the UAE, most of the clients they have the year end of December, so the inventory verification was done towards the year end. But there are some clients who have the year end of March, and it was really challenging to validate the assertion of existence with regards to the inventory. Professional skepticism over going concern, a very fundamental thing to be considered by the auditors, and we need to keep our eyes and ears open at all the time, and also reflect our thoughts on what's happening in the market outside the focus of this particular audit. Of course, managing the expectations of the client was another challenging thing, because there were regulatory deadlines, which were, like, if I talk about the DIFC here, the regulatory expectations was that all the audited financials would need to be submitted before the end of April. Then we were in a lockdown situation, so for working and managing the expectations of the client as well as the regulators is what was a challenge. So again, these are the things you need to think about when you are writing your exams and address these kind of issues in your exams. And I'll just wrap up my presentation here so that we have enough time for Omar to take you through the real practical issues which which you come across in the exam scenario.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Saad. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the insightful session. And I could really sort of, I went back to the days of auditing and the days of, preparing for my audit and assurance exams, all the words, the professional skepticism, prudence, risk assessments, all of these. So you spoke the words of a true auditor, and what basically auditing means in the real life scenario. And it's all about the language. It's all about, when thinking of the, audit and assurance exams, it's all about ingraining these languages, these words, that the four keywords you mentioned, in the processes and in our answers planning and everything. So without further ado, over to Omar for his expert session. Omar, Over to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tahir. And it was really amazing when I was enjoying the session by Mr. Sadmanwar. So, just to tell a bit about Mr. Sadmanwar, I just realized that I have been uh, following him as my inspiration since it's been a number of years, and I'm so happy and at the same time very privileged to be sharing this platform with him. And coming back to the topic, which is how to prepare for your AA exam, audit and assurance exam. Uh, I have been lecturing ACCA for last 9 years, as you guys probably already heard, and I have been lecturing especially in Malaysia, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Singapore, especially in Asian countries. And but my of course my first uh, introduction is definitely I'm working as an audit manager of Baker Tilly Malaysia, and I've been in audit industry for 6 years. And so it's been amazing combining these two careers. One is of an auditor and one is of an audit lecturer, where I definitely can implement all my audit practical knowledges from audit experiences to the sessions that I conduct during my audit classes, and vice versa. I can learn more about the auditing standards and I bring it back to my practical experience. So it's been amazing. Last uh, I would say 7 to 8 years combining these two careers. So I'll get straight to my next slide, which will talk about the audit and assurance and what are my main topics. And my main topics are definitely the common mistakes that you make when you go for the exam, when you attend the exam, and at the same time, what are the ways that you can uh, actually improve your chances not to make those mistakes, I would say. And at the same time, how to most importantly keep yourself calm and quiet and to write the relevant points during the exam. As Mr. Sadmania mentioned, as an auditor you have to be professionally skeptic. At the same time, when you are as an auditor, as he said, that auditors are absolutely trusted by millions of shareholders. Let's take Google for example. The CEO of Google is definitely Sundar Pichai, but the auditors of CEO are the one who create the trust of the financial statements when a reporter use it. So an auditor is a highly dignified and trusted person for all the shareholders. So I'm so happy that you guys are going to attend the double exam, which is definitely exciting. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is, of course, the first thing that I definitely know that all of you probably have something to improve on, which is your time management. All right. So there's a very famous quote, which is, if you fail to plan, then definitely you're planning to fail. So before you go for the exam, make sure you do your proper time management plan. So in my next slide, I'm going to tell you about the time management more specifically for each of the question. Yeah. So the first question, as you know, you will have three OTQs, which is objective test questions. Each of it would be for 10 marks. So I would have this suggestion for you, which I definitely suggest to all my students. You take 2 minutes to read all the five requirements first, and don't read the options yet. Read the requirements first. That's going to be very important. And then take the 6 minutes to relax and enjoy the scenario. A lot of you, I know personally, that you guys really rush when you read the scenario, which is, trust me, it's probably the worst thing that you do during the exam. Your entire exam, your entire success of the exam is dependent on the scenario. So if you are rushing when you're reading a scenario, you're definitely reducing your chances of passing. So very importantly, relax and read the scenario like as if you're reading a story. Probably you're reading a Harry Potter book. It's definitely not as exciting as Harry Potter book, but then again, you know, enjoy it. And then once you're done, because when you really enjoy it, when you really read it properly, then definitely you have everything in your mind. And when you have everything in your mind, then definitely when you are answering the questions, you are answering relevant points. That's the most important thing. So then 10 minutes, answer all the 5 questions. Each question shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes. The reason why? The reason is step 2. You have spent 6 minutes to read the scenario. That means you have invested 6 minutes. This is not spending 6 minutes, this is investing 6 minutes. Remember this. So I'm going to discuss about the next question, which is CRQ. And as you know, that you would have 2 categories of CRQ. Tahir, would you mind to go to the next slide, CRQ? Yeah, excellent. So as you know that you'll have 3 CRQ questions. The first one, of course, would be a 30-mark questions, and you have 54 minutes for that. So my step 1 would be the same. Take 2 minutes, read all the 5 requirements. My step 2, in this case, you have definitely have a larger scenario, which will probably go up to the 1 whole page or 1 page and a quarter of the next page. And you have 16 minutes to read it and understand it, which is very important. So read it very carefully, understand every single part of it. Then that's it. Move on to your question, to your answer part. Now, remember, when you move on to the answer part, you read the requirement again before you start writing. That's very, very important. So read the requirement first, then move to the scenario, read the scenario. After you finish the scenario, read the requirement again. That is absolutely important. So that's when you really have to make a planning of your answer that I'm going to discuss in a bit. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is about CRQ for 20 marks question. And as you can see, you have 36 minutes. My step 1 remains the same. 2 minutes, only read the requirements. My step 2, in this case, I would suggest you to take 10 minutes to read the story and read the entire scenario. And the last but not the least, of course, 24 minutes to answer the questions. Same strategy, same ideology, that once you have spent your time for reading the scenario well, you don't need to read it again. That's the thing. That's the biggest mistake that students make if they don't read the scenario well. And same goes to all my AAA students. When I teach them, all the professional level students, they make the same mistake as well, just like you, just like probably some of you did or happen to do. So it's very important for you to really enjoy the entire scenario, understand every part of it, so that when you start writing, you don't have to go back to the scenario and read again. That's very important, because when you go back to the scenario, trust me, you are going to read again, and you have to read every part of it again, and you're spending another 10 minutes probably, on the scenario. And so you have very, very less time to write your answers. So I'm going to go to my next session, which is a very important session, I would say, which is irrelevant writing. Oh my God. So as Mr. Sadmani has said, it's a lot of times, as auditors are trusted. So if I'm a trusted person, can I say something which is irrelevant? Trust me, examiner is not your mind reader. Examiner only read your script. So if you write anything irrelevant, which probably in your mind, you know what you're writing, you know what is going on in your mind, but you can't express it. Trust me, examiner only read your words, not your mind. So make sure you have answer planning. So the reason why you write irrelevantly, because you don't have answer planning, probably. Another reason, you start jumping to the next question when you are done with one question. Don't do that. Take a break. So that's my next slide about taking the break, which is, yes, that's the most powerful thing that I did when I attended my audit papers. I took a 10 seconds break after every set of questions. Now you have to question me what I mean by that. That means when you have 5 set of questions in your exam. So first set of questions is obviously the OTQ. Once you're done with that, take a 10 seconds break. If I take a 10 seconds break now, you guys will feel very, very peaceful. Trust me. I just took 5 seconds break. You guys already feeling better. I'm very sure about that. So make sure you take 10 seconds break after every section of your question. So meaning to say that once you're done with your first 5 questions of audit Q, first 3 questions rather of 10 marks. So after you're done with your 30 marks answering, take a 10 seconds break. Those are objectives. Probably doesn't make you too much stressed. You're going towards the next part, which is about focusing on your next on writing. So when you focus on your writing, take 10 seconds break and start writing. That's how it goes. And the next part is the most important that you see just now, the 30 seconds CRQ answer planning time. Absolutely important. Before you write your answer, especially for CRQ answer planning, set the answer in your mind. Fix in your mind what you're going to write. Think about it. Is it the right thing? Is it the right answer to the question? Is it going to be irrelevant? Ask yourself, is it going to be irrelevant? If you write anything irrelevant, you get no mark. You can only get mark when you write relevant. So the most important part for an audit paper is to take this 30 seconds break before you answer any question. Any of the written question, I would say, any of the questions where you need to write essays or paragraphs. So very important, if you're studying any CRQ, take 30 seconds break. So you're going to take 13 times a break for 30 seconds. That's going to give you so much of energy in your mind. That's going to make your exam so well planned. I can really tell you, and you can trust me. You are not going to write anything irrelevant. Trust me, if you write irrelevant, probably examiner will spot fail you. I'm going to talk about that later. Moving to my next slide. Yeah, that's another big mistake. You don't understand the requirement. And this is examiner's comment. Most importantly, read all the examiner's report. You will understand more about the weaknesses. So what examiner commented is he said that candidates often didn't read the requirements carefully, and answers were often too generic. Absolutely or not. If you are not aware of your requirements, if you don't read the scenario, definitely you're going to write something which is very vague, very not relevant, very not specific to the scenario. Trust me, you've got to write everything which is related to the scenario. You got to pick up the points from the scenario and not anything from your book. So I would be suggesting you later that write in applied form. Don't write bookish language. You don't get a mark for writing bookish language. All right, I'm moving to my next slide, which is, yes, as I said earlier, read the requirement twice. Once before you read the scenario, once before you start writing. Before you start writing, read the requirement. After you read the requirement, you have 30 seconds to answer planning. Then you start writing. Trust me, you get mark only for relevant points. So even if you write 80% of an answer, so if a question asks for 10 paragraphs or 10 points, even if you write 8 paragraphs or 8 points and those are relevant, you're going to get 8 marks. But if you write 10 irrelevant points, you're probably going to fail. Now, what is important? Getting 80 or failing? Definitely getting 80 is more important. I'm moving to my next slide. Here you go. Now, I have a very important tool, I would call it, and very popular to my students, especially my AAA students, which is SMP. and I call it strong mini paragraph. I'm going to discuss more about SMP, and I'm going to tell you how strong it is in my next slides. But I'm going to talk more a bit that when you are to explain, write in SMPs, and when you are to identify a list down and state, just write brief points. So dash answer, dash answer, dash answer. Just brief. You don't need to explain anything. Okay. So when you need to explain, you're going to write SMPs. I'm going to discuss a lot more on SMPs in my next part. So next slide, please. Excellent. Now, this is very important. What is 1 mark? How do I get 1 mark? Especially for CAQs when you need to explain. My very simple answer. You write 1 SMP. So that's my next slide. That you write 1 SMP for your 1 mark. What is SMP? It's a small paragraph, and you have to ask me what is small paragraph. Small paragraph is probably a paragraph of 2 or 3 lines, not sentences, which explains one separate valid point. One more time. Strong mini paragraph is a mini paragraph of probably 2 or 3 lines, which explains one separate and valid point. Why it is strong? Because it explains one point. Why it is strong? Because it gives you 1 mark. So for every questions related to explanation, description, discussion, write 1 SMP. You write SMP, you're challenging the examiner for giving you a mark. And examiner are looking at the screen. Examiner is in front of the monitor, has a scanned copy of your answer script, or nowadays it's not scanned copy because you're going to attend the CBE. So he has a copy of the answer in front of him. And trust me, when you write 1 SMP, examiner is going to be challenged to give you a mark. And if the examiner doesn't give you a mark, the examiner has to explain to the head examiner, or have to explain to himself that why I'm not giving a mark. So when you write an SMP, you explain the point, you're really challenging for a mark. And that's the next part, which is applied forms. What is applied form? Let me give an example. You all know about borrowing cost. Now, what is the accounting standards for borrowing cost? Of course, is IAS 23. Trust me, there's no mark for mentioning IAS 23. But it's definitely better. But there is no mark. Okay, make it clear. So, but based on IAS 23, you definitely know that if you have to pay interest, then that interest can be capitalized for that for the duration of the project for which the loan is taken. Now, if you find in any scenario that interest was not capitalized, then your first paragraph or your first SMP, if you simply write that based on IAS 23, interest has to be capitalized if during the period of the project for which the loan is taken, it is very, very bookish. Why don't you just write it in applied form, right from the scenario? So you just add on some words. But from the scenario, during this particular period, probably January to December, the financial manager mistakenly or probably unknowingly forgot or didn't capitalize the interest, even if there was a time of the project. So all assets are most likely to be understated, because if you capitalize, you debit the asset by interest expense in interest amount. But in this case, you didn't. So definitely asset is understated. But you don't say definitely. You say it looks like asset is understated. My bad. So that's very important. So when you write the first paragraph, you write about the scenario instead of writing absolutely out of your book. So that is called applied form. So write always in applied form. relate your answer to the scenario all the time. All the time. You must relate your answer to the scenario. Examiner has to feel that you are dealing with a scenario and not writing something out of the book. Clear? Next slide, please. That's the most important part of my slide, is unprofessional language, and it's a core mistake. Now, ask me what is core mistake. I would say a mistake that can make you spot fail. That means once examiner finds this kind of mistake, examiner does not think about or doesn't feel comfortable to make you pass. Very alarming. What is that core mistake? It's very important for you to know that if you use unprofessional language, then you're probably making a core mistake. Now, what is unprofessional language? Have a look at the next slide. A language that an auditor must not use. As simple as that. So when it comes to audit opinion, as Mr. Sadmania was mentioning during his session, that audit opinion is definitely the most important part of an audit. Now, you definitely know that we do audit on a sampling basis. When you do audit on a sample basis, you are not 100% sure. When you are not 100% sure, can you say that, for example, if there is a scenario where you have a disagreement with the client, you want to probably get some more document, you want to get the loan agreement, you want to get some hire purchase agreement, you're going to get some, sensitive documents that the client consider very, very PNC and doesn't want to share with you. You probably have lack of scope, and why that is, and of course at the same time, since the client doesn't share with you, and client probably do some misstatement, probably have a disagreement with the client as well. So if you have a disagreement with the client, now can you, first of all, you don't write that there is a disagreement with the client. You don't be so harsh. You say it looks like there's a disagreement with the client. Now, when there's a disagreement with the client, what is the opinion that we have? What are the sections? One, if the disagreement is material, and is it going to make the material misstatement? Number two, is the misstatement is material and pervasive? Now, definitely you know about materiality and pervasiveness, but you definitely don't know that it is for sure is material or for sure is material and pervasive. So what is say, instead of saying that this is definitely material or this is definitely material and pervasive, you write that this is most likely to be considered, or it is most likely to be appropriate to be considered as material, or it seems to be material. So because it's very important to know that the materiality definitely differs from one audit firm to another audit firm. One audit firm might consider 2% as material. One audit firm might consider 5% as material. There's a huge difference from audit firm to audit firm. So you definitely don't know what is an absolute perfect decision on materiality percentage. So you always say it looks like material, or it can be considered as material. Now I'm moving to the opinion part, and you definitely have to say that an audit. So based on disagreement, if it is material, what do? You put except for. So what are you going to write? You're going to write then except for opinion is most likely to be appropriate, or an except for opinion appears to be appropriate. When there's a disagreement and it is both material and pervasive, so you first establish why it is pervasive, and you say that it looks to be more both material and pervasive, and therefore an adverse opinion might be appropriate, because you're suggesting. Trust me, you are not the partner in the scenario. In the scenario, you are not the partner. So you're not deciding the opinion. You're only suggesting the opinion to your partner or your manager. That's a very important thing. You have to understand your role in the scenario. That's why, remember I said, read the scenario right like you're reading the book or a story or a Harry Potter movie. So I'm moving to the next slide, which is that is my most important tips that I have for you. Write this particular uh, form, which is most likely to be appropriate. But when it comes to ethics, now I'm moving to the next slide. Probably I would have that slide as well. Yes. When it comes to ethics and ethical threats, ACCA members are the ethical accountants. ACCA has the hashtag power of ethics. Why? Because ACCA established itself to create ethical accountants. There is absolute no compromise when it comes to ethics. Let's make it clear. So the moment you see that there might be a chance for you to lose your ethical stand, for you to compromise your integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, professional competence, and due care, professional behavior, you better be careful to say that there cannot be a scenario when I will continue my audit or I will continue my professional service with these threats. I can't continue my service with these threats. So these threats are must to be avoided. The most important part, these are to be avoided. These are must to be avoided. Why? Because I can't compromise with my ethical ground. I can't compromise with my ethical standards. I can't compromise with my ACCA code of ethics and conduct. I can't. So if you find an ethical threat, first of all, of course, explain why it is an ethical threat, but write it very specifically that this threat must be reduced to an acceptable level. If not, you must find out an alternative. Probably the last resort is resignation as an auditor. There couldn't be any scenario when you say that it looks like to be an ethical threat and auditors may consider to resign. No, if it is an ethical threat, auditors cannot consider to resign. Auditors must resign if they cannot reduce this ethical threat to an acceptable level. Bear that in mind. So these are the biggest part of entire ACCA qualification and all the exams that are conducted where students make this core mistake. When it comes to ethics, be 100% sure that you can't continue with ethical threats, so you must avoid those. When it comes to audit opinion, be 100% sure you're suggesting to your partner. So most likely to be appropriate. But when it comes to ethics, ethical threats must be avoided. I hope you're clear on that. Next slide, please. So I'm pretty much done with my presentation. Use accglobal.com, a fantastic website. And trust me, it is much more developed when it comes to the contents for your study purposes or study sources. Fantastic. It was not as developed when I was a student. So you guys are very, very lucky. You have fantastic sources of technical articles. And most importantly, I loved the self-check modules. I love the CVE platform. Excellent. So use it to the best of your capabilities and definitely visit it every day. Find out the technical articles. Read all the latest technical articles. Very, very important. Find out what examiners reports suggest you. Which are the mistakes you should never make. I hope you find this session useful. Thank you so much. And you can definitely do it.
Thank you. Very nice, Omar. I'd like to add one point to your presentation, and I absolutely love the way you emphasized on the ethical piece. Most of the times, for the auditors in my office, they come and question how do we know whether we are ethically compliant or not. And my response to them is, if we read by the textbook, sometimes we are not able to make a judgment whether it is ethically compliant, we are ethically compliant or not. But ask your heart, and if you feel that this is not right, then that means that is not ethical thing to do. So for this is something which is really practical in terms of ensuring the compliance with ethics.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for adding to my session. So it is
Right.
absolutely important. Yep, we are ACCA is so ACCA is established to create ethical accountants. So no compromise. Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent point to sort of end your sessions there, Omar. And I completely agree with the things that you've raised, as well as the insights Saad has shared. I think both of you all have had some really valuable sort of points in terms of being able to guide and steer our students that are potentially looking at becoming auditors at some point of their careers and their lives. So if I am allowed to really summarize in key steps everything that you two have mentioned on the session today, I think it's all about ensuring that we take the necessary steps, basically boiling down to understanding what audit and assurance is, and really understanding the role of an auditor. So Saad has very well laid the foundation where he's given the four key areas students should really think of anytime they are dealing with questions and answers, and very rightly pointed out, Saad, these are the main areas, the planning, the processing, and these are the risk assessments. These are the main areas that can easily get the easy 10 to 15 marks, for a student who's preparing for an audit exam. Omar had a couple of points, particularly around understanding the requirements. It's quite important that we don't rush into the requirements. You, Saad, stuck to the audit lingo, the professional sort of language. I remember back in the days when I was doing my audit exams, I literally actually ended up building a mini audit sort of dictionary. So I would have words, things like professional skepticism, things like relevance, materiality, and it's all about using the right language and giving the examiner the marker, the impression that you really understand the aesthetics behind what is involved in auditing. You understand the role of the auditor. You are sort of like, think of yourself as being in a in a character, and think about being an auditor for working for a firm of and understanding the requirements, and then presenting your sort of answers and building them up. So very sort of well formalized, and that was the vision when we sort of were planning this session, and we wanted really students to understand the aesthetics and the essence of what is audit and assurance, how is audit planned, really be able to think about their exams and how they would tackle their audit exams from a practical perspective, look into their daily lives, look and think about materiality, internal control. And I always end up giving examples like, think about materiality and how much money, if you've got about $100 in your pocket, how much would you have to lose before you start worrying about how much money is material. So some people end up saying, well, $10, some people say $20. It means that that's your threshold, that is $10. If you lose $10, it's material for you. And that's how explaining the concepts and linking it to practicality and giving them that insight. So thank you very much for both of your insights. Now let's move on to the Q&A session. We've firstly had a lot of engagement on this session. We've seen a lot of positive comments come through by students and the attendees saying they appreciate it, they find it quite useful. I think let's get cracking with the questions. Some of the questions have been coming up. They're quite interesting. Uh, First one is around, I failed the audit and assurance exam twice, and not cannot understand how to pass. If you would be able to sort of help us throw some light. So Omar, I think this is one for you, looking at your teaching experience. But if you allow, I would just like to really begin with some insights, and if that's okay with you.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right. So for this student, I think it's important to really understand, how they're failing and assess, look back on the marks. Um, what marks have they got? Have they failed? Is it a marginal fail? Is it something between 45 to 50? Is it a major fail? Have they scored anything below 35? And then understand whether it was a knowledge gap. If it is a fail between 45 and 49, then I think it's not a knowledge gap. It's probably an exam technique issue. If it's a major
Yeah.
fail, then probably something around addressing certain knowledge gaps, and worth maybe looking into taking some support, tuition, going back and revising some key topics. So I think it's really depending on the student and their personal circumstances. They'd have to look back and reflect. And Umar, I mean, please feel free to bring in any particular expert comments you would have, any suggestions you would have for the students.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely it's the most common, I would say, range where students fail, 45 to 49, and especially students who attended 2 times. And I'm pretty sure that his marks were somewhere in this range. And the only thing that I can suggest him is definitely to look for where he's making those mistakes when it comes to professional language. As I said, that examiner is not your mind reader. So make sure examiner do not misunderstand you from writing your words, from reading your words. So your words have to reflect what you understand. And I'm pretty sure when you get 45 to 49, knowledge wise, as Tahir said, definitely you're okay. But uh, but professional language wise, probably you're not as good as to pass the uh, double paper and move on to the next step. But at the same time, I would also like to emphasize on one matter, because when you move on to the level 3, P7, which is triple A, is your optional paper. As uh, as we have been emphasizing on both Mr. Sadmani and me, is that auditors are trusted. We are the trusted accountants. So when you complete your F8 and don't take your next paper, that means this is the last time when examiner can test your knowledge for audit. Can you understand the importance of examiner passing you or letting you pass this paper, and how much risks that he is taking if you are actually not good enough? So that's the thing. Yeah, Mr. Tahir. Yeah, Mr. Satya.
Yeah,
Yes, Saad,
I
please.
would like to add here further, most of the students who are taking up these exams, many of them, they do not have the practical experience. And the kind of advice I would want to give here is that you can go to the listed company's website, extract the financial statements, and think through in terms of how you would have approached that audit, how you would have done things differently than what currently auditors have disclosed and things like that. And that will kind of give you a little bit of a practical experience in the real life scenario. And when you apply these learnings, what you have into this exam paper, this is the difference between the pass and fail.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Excellent point, Saad. Thank you very much. I mean, it's quite crucial, and I think we do get I get a lot of feedback from students, in the region when we speak to them, and particularly around their audit and insurance exam, or their performance management related exam. It is experience that the lack of practical experience, the lack of practical knowledge is a major reason why students tend to sort of not understand the underlying principles, the underlying concepts. So a very well addressed point, Saad, and thanks, Umar, for your valuable comments as well. I think, Saad, the next one would be something for you to sort of pick up.
Hmm.
I have this is a question around firms currently are struggling to generate revenue, and in this kind of situation, do you think firms are considering the risk of the assignment? I'm not sure
I,
if the question is clear, Saad, but I think what the person is trying to say that these days, and looking at the current challenges, the firms have been struggling to generate their revenue targets,
I kind
and
of get I kind of get this point. At the end of the day, we are in a business. Then if we have to refuse any client, that means that much worth of business we will be losing. But in practice, what we have seen is that taking on onboarding the bad client, brings the reputational damage. And once the reputation is damaged, you will lose a lot of business. So what we tend to do is, when we see this risk, when we see the fraud element kick in, the anti-money laundering element kick in, then we kind of immediately disengage from the client or refuse the client. Uh, uh, this is I can say on behalf of at least the top 10 firms. I don't know about the other smaller practices, how they manage this kind of a situation, but certainly for the top 10 network firms, this is the very high risk area. And all the top 10 networks, they have the tools defined and designed in order to address this risk.
Brilliant. Thank you, Saad. Thanks. And really, I think it's about the firm's reputation. And audit and assurance, if you look at it, is all about the ethical stance, and it's all about, the firm's reputation to be able to carry out their practice successfully. So quite a valid point there, Saad. Thank you very much. We've got another question from someone who says, talking about fraud, internal audit, forensic auditing departments, I get, especially in terms of internship opportunities in these departments. I mean, why so? So I think they're trying to ask about, internship opportunities and availability of these internship opportunities around the areas of, forensic auditing, internal auditing, fraud, etc. Saad, so have you got any insights to share with us on that?
Uh, yes, actually, this fraud and internal audit, because there is no mandatory requirement for the training, so-called, in order to gain the qualification on that side, that does not trigger the training. So what happens is that in this fraud, forensic, internal audit type of services, we tend to gain the qualified individuals. Qualified individuals may come with the audit background, but then the firms take on the responsibility to mold them and train them in the fraud and forensic side. Maybe they ask them to take on the further qualifications like CFE for fraud. If it is internal audit, then CIA, or sometimes it may be the technology related, then CSA is the qualification. So this is the main reason why I see we don't see many of the training opportunities in the fraud and forensic side of the practice.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Saad. No, I think the next question is pretty much open to you, Umar and Saad, both for answering. So this is around how is digitizing, the era, how is it changing the way audit is done, and what's the future of audit with, emerging technology coming up?
Yeah. So for this digital, it has certainly changed the way we do things. So currently, we use a lot of artificial intelligence in our process, and more so, this has increased in the past 3-4 months since the COVID-19 situation has arisen. So we do a lot of analytical reviews based on Power BI, which allows us to focus our attention on the given particular situation and the issues that we may see in the graphical presentations. Also, we use certain robotic process automation. These are small kind of robotic process that we have developed. For example, preparing the engagement letters. We have kind of automated these kind of processes. This is small manual routine task. Then preparing the bank confirmation request letters. Again, this is a routine task. So once we have captured this information, then every year we just need to update the template and press one button. It will kind of throw out all the bank confirmation letters and so on. So these are some of the processes we have seen that that has brought a lot of efficiency in there, which allows us to focus more on the real value in the audit. There are certain processes and the tools that we currently use. For example, we use the Caseware as a technology to do our audits. Then the client can upload all the details on the portal, and automatically, based on the indexing that we have done, the documents are automatically placed in the relevant sections in the audit file for the auditors to review. So again, thereby increasing the efficiency. So there are a lot of tools. Still, there is a lot more to be done in terms of gaining efficiency through the technology. But this is just a beginning, I would say.
Thank you, Saad. I mean, Umar, have you got anything to add to the response for the student here? How do you see auditing, or how do you see technology basically? The shaping of future auditing. And again, I'll bounce the question back to Saad. Once Umar has concluded, but I think it's quite a key here to sort of understand or help the audience understand. How will auditing as a profession be, probably 10 years down the line, or after the next decade or so?
All right. When it comes to audit industry, I mean, as a lot of people probably are saying that AI is going to take the jobs from the auditors or accountants. I would not agree with that. Why? Because I would say, instead of, let's say, if I am a fresh graduate now, and if I want to join an audit firm, or if I want to join a corporate in finance department, then probably my initial job would be an audit trainee or audit associate, or an accounts trainee or accounts associate. So if, let's say, the AI really takes over the job from the finance departments, or those like journal entry, the accounting entry posting jobs, and those are the clerical jobs, then definitely humans are required for the advisory jobs. So instead of being an audit intern or audit associate, or accounts intern or accounts associate, probably you will be an assistant advisor to your senior managers. So probably you'll be planning more. You'll be preparing more plannings for the company's futures, and you'll be part of those advisory jobs, instead of the very monotonous jobs, which is about like keying in into the accounts on a daily basis. And when it comes to the audit industry, as Mr. Saad mentioned, we definitely use a lot of tools, especially the BI tools, which are really helpful for us to especially do the analytical procedures to understand the client's trends in terms of revenue and the profits and others. And at the same time, which also helps us to understand whether there is an increased audit risk for this client as well. So, which of course, if you do it manually, it's going to take more time, and probably is going to slow down the process. So this BI tools really helps us a lot. And at the same time, if you are a student, I would definitely suggest get familiar. And if you want to be part of audit industry, or if you want to have a career in audit, probably get familiar with the audit softwares as well. When you're a student, get familiar with those. There's no harm, and you can only enlighten your resume and strengthen your resume if you can prove that you have a good exposure on the audit software. It's really helpful. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Omar. Over to you, Saad. Saad, any sort of concluding thoughts on, what do you think the future of the profession is looking like? Should it be a concerning thing for, any aspiring auditors? Are they still on the right track to aspire to become an auditor one day?
Yes, I think the future is definitely bright, provided all the accountants behave and act ethically, and then the future is bright, certainly. And for those students who are struggling to gain the articleship, I would strongly advise, as Omar also just mentioned a while back, that you must gain an insight into the technology tools like the audit software, like the caseware, working papers. There are a lot of videos, tutorials available online. And if you make yourself familiar on the day one when you go for an interview, or at the when you are appointed as a trainee, you have a head start. And one thing I would want to close my this remark with this point, that ethics is absolutely important. And these five principles of ethics, that is the integrity, professional behavior, professional competency, and due care. Then we have objectivity and the confidentiality. these five, they are the pillars of any profession. And I have noted and I have experienced that, even if you apply this personally to our personal life, then also it allows us to succeed in our career. So for, stick to these five principles close to your heart, and inshallah you will all succeed.
Inshallah.
Thank you, Saad. Thank you so much. I mean, just conscious of time here, but look, I mean, as much as I'd not like to break things up. I'm going to have to bring this really engaging session to an end. I mean, I really wanted to once again take this opportunity to thank both our presenters, Saad and Omar, for sharing the invaluable amount of information and insights that you've shared with us today. I'm sure all the attendees will be able to agree that the two of you have left them with a lot of food for thought, and basically given them a clear direction in supporting their next steps towards becoming a qualified ACCA member, or perhaps even becoming a qualified auditor. So thank you for really supporting the session. Thank you again for all your time. Thank you to all our listeners for tuning into this session today. We look forward to having you on our future sessions too. So until then, take care and keep safe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Bye bye. All the best.
All
Thank
the
you.
best to everyone.